Hello everyone, welcome back to the H.V.M.N. podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Lat Mansoor, a PhD in Physiology, Anatomy and Genetics, and the research lead of Health, Environment and Nutrition. And if you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and leave a review, and if you have any question, leave us a comment, and as always, we appreciate it if you can share it with a friend. Now, without further ado, let's get into this episode of H.V.M.N. podcast. Hi, this is Dr. Lat Mansoor, your host on Health, Environment and Nutrition podcast. In this episode, we had Lisa Tamati joining us. Lisa is an extreme ultra endurance athlete with 25 years of experience running and competing in the world's toughest endurance events. She is also a health optimization coach who focuses on human potential, mental toughness, and resilience. She is the author of 3 best-selling books, Running Hot, Running to Extremes, and her latest book is Relentless, How a Mother and Daughter Defied the Odds. A book telling a 1 in a million comeback story of bringing her mother, Isabel, back from the brink of death after going through aneurysms, stroke, multiple concussions, and brain tumors. In this episode, Lisa shared her story, insights, and learnings from her life experiences, as well as the story of her mother's recovery from a series of brain health complications. So please go ahead, enjoy, and stay tuned. Today, we have Lisa Tamati on the H.V.M.N. podcast. I know you've been on our podcast before with Jeff in 2020, and it was a very touching podcast. I've listened to it. And thank you for coming on again. And I was just recently, last week, actually recorded with Lisa on her podcast, just going in everything science on ketones. So hopefully that was helpful to your audience.
Amazing.
And I'm interested to learn more about your story this time around.
Fantastic. I'm just so privileged to be on your amazing show. And I just loved having you on my podcast because it was just so fascinating. And I've had a lot of fantastic feedback. I actually brought it up a few episodes so that I could release it quickly and get it out there because it was such a good episode. So thank you very much. It was awesome.
No, thank you. Pleasure is mine. So for the sake of our listeners, all listeners who have been around and new listeners, please share with us, like, what's your background? What's your story? And I know you are halfway around the world in New Zealand. Please do share your story.
Yeah. I'm in New Zealand. It's summer over here, guys. So I live a couple of minutes from the beach, so it's beautiful over here. I've got a background as an ultra endurance athlete, so doing extreme long distances and expeditions as well as races. And I've spent sort of 25 years doing crazy stuff, really. Done over 70,000 kilometers in training and events, ran over 2,000 Ks in the Sahara, Moroccan, the Arabian, Libyan deserts, Gobi, Jordan, Niger, Death Valley in the USA is a famous race over there that you have through Death Valley, which is done a couple of times. Ran right through New Zealand for charity at one point, did stuff in the Himalayas, outback of Australia. So I had lots and lots of adventures that I like to share with people, sort of the learnings from those experiences. But I think the funny thing is that I never had any talent as a runner. I was just very bloody minded, and one of the reasons why I went super long was because I wasn't super fast, right? And I was an asthmatic as a kid, so it's sort of in and out of hospital as a youngster, very small lung capacity, very poor VO2 max, so really illogical to end up being a professional runner, I feel like. But I was a very slow, long distance runner.
Wow. I mean, you've overcome all of that, and very interested to hear, first of all, like, how did you overcome all of those cards stacked against you? And what sort of training did you have to go through in order to really prep yourself for such long distance running? Because from the sound of it, it's like if tomorrow is the end of days and we do not have any more cars and stuff, we can count on you to to cover long distance. So what did you do to overcome those genetics shortcomings and lung capacity and all that?
Well, the cool thing about ultramarathoning is that it's really more about mindset than anything else. And in that department, I was, quite good, like a lot of determination, bloody mindedness. I had in my early adult years a very difficult relationship with a guy who was a very extreme, amazing athlete, but it was a very abusive relationship. I'll just call it what it was. But the good thing about it was that we got to travel the world. We cycled everywhere. We climbed mountains. We trekked. We did all that good, amazing sort of stuff. And it was a bit like being in boot camp for 5 years, with a sergeant major who was really nasty sometimes. And but he would push me to my absolute limits. And so I went way beyond what I thought I could do. And, I was in love with this guy. So he looked like Brad Pitt, so he got away with
that
a
may
lot.
That may have helped.
Exactly. And I was young and stupid. And so I pushed myself really hard. I wanted to please him. I wanted to, impress him and all that sort of stuff. And I didn't. He was a very hard man to please. But what it did is it opened up a world to me of that I am actually capable of so much more than what I thought I was capable of. And unfortunately, the relationship after 5 years, we were actually crossing the Libyan desert when that relationship blew up, so to speak. We were doing an expedition and we were in a military barred zone. We were crossing the Libyan desert, the most beautiful place, like really incredible desert on the border between Egypt and Libya. So we had to sort of disappear into the desert away from the military. And this is a long time ago. This is back in, 1997. We had 250 kilometres that we had to walk. We only had 20 litres of water a day, in total, 20 litres of water. So we had no places to get water en route. And if you do the math, that doesn't really add up. So that's like we had enough for 2 litres a day. And we didn't know whether we were going to get through in about 7 to 10 days. So we had to sort of bargain for 10. Really extreme, on the limit, crazy. I look back now and thinking, what the hell was I thinking? And we had to carry this all. So we had 35 kilo, I had 35 kilo backpack on. The guys had even a little bit more than that. I don't know what that is in pounds, but it's a lot. It was about 2/3 of my whole body weight, right? And so trying to cover a distance in 40-degree odd heat of 45 kilometre sort of distance, which is like 27, 28 miles a day, through really difficult terrain, and then you have a blow up with your boyfriend in the middle of it, and he left me.
No.
On day 4. You have to read my first book for that story. Day 4, he decided the relationship's over, and he's left me with the other 2 guys that were on the expedition, and disappeared over the sand dunes. And I laugh about it now, but it was a really dramatic situation. We didn't know we were going to survive. We were way extreme dehydration, and that expedition really pushed me to the absolute limits, and my whole world sort of fell apart. My relationship and everything was falling apart. And in that moment of him leaving, and I didn't know whether he was going to survive or we were going to survive at that point, I decided that I had to be able to compartmentalize my emotional falling apart from the actual job that I had to do to survive. And so that was really a big lesson to learn, is to be able to function when everything's turning to crap, so to speak, and still be able to carry on. And, obviously I did survive. Had some major health issues afterwards. I had problems with my kidneys and nerves in the upper body. And it took me 2 years to really fully recover from that physically. Emotionally took me a lot longer to recover. But what it did is it was a baptism of fire. So I went through this intense, terrible experience, and 5 years of difficult life with him that had destroyed my self-confidence. I had no self-confidence. And after I recovered and physically, I heard about a race in Morocco called the Marathon des Sables, which is a really famous ultramarathon. And it was touted as the toughest event on earth at that point. And I was reading this and I'm going, 240 kilometres across the Sahara, you get 9 litres of water a day, you've got doctors on hand, you've got 700 runners, and I'm like going, I reckon I could do this, because I'd never run anything. I hadn't even done a marathon or anything. But I had this experience in the Libyan desert where it was same distance, but we had 3.5 times the amount of weight. We had much less water. I had this horrible boyfriend terrorizing me.
Yeah, if you can go through that, I mean, you can go through anything after that.
Well, that's exactly what I thought, right? So I signed up for this event. I had no idea about anything. I went in, pretty naive, and I did it, and I just loved it. And it was the most amazing, uplifting experience. It was still tough, but it wasn't tough like that other one was tough. And I met all these wonderful, supportive people telling me how great I was doing, and I did really well. I sort of, got in the top 10, and I got to the end of that, and I'm like, oh, this is amazing. And it had built my self-confidence so much that then I became addicted, of course. And so I started just doing one ultra marathon after the other, bang, 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 from that sort of...
Isn't it ironic that it was that sort of super long distance race that almost broke you, but it was also the super long distance race that built you back up?
Yep, well, it's get back on the horse, right? When you fall off. There was a deep yearning in my soul, I suppose, to prove that I wasn't hopeless. And because I'd been told for years, and I'd also grown up with an amazing dad, but a very tough dad who expected a lot. He wanted me to be, the best at my career, the best at sport, the best. So I think I went from one, trying to please my dad to trying to please this other guy. So definitely some issues going on, shall we say, to then stepping into my own power of like, okay, I've been through, the ringer, but these races just really gave me more and more confidence and strength. And then I had failures along the way. I had races where I completely bombed, and those were new lessons to learn. And when you're doing this sort of stuff, it's really about you against you. It's not about you against the other runners, really. For me, it wasn't. It was really much about how hard can I push myself, and what can I actually achieve as far as the distances and the crazy places that you get to go to, the adventures you get to have. So that was a pretty amazing life, and gave me lots of experience for then going into things like business and teaching and health and all the stuff that I do now.
Right. Before we go into that, I've got a lot of questions about that as well. And before we go into further on, let's unpack your experience that you just shared with us for a bit. And I want to talk a bit on the healing process that you went through, right? Both physical and emotional, right? And you said, it took you about 2 years to recover physically. Was that just from the stress and from the pressure of the race itself, or was it something else? Was it over time?
Well, that one, particularly was very, very damaging to the kidneys. So the dehydration was to the point so that on the second to last day, it came to a point we'd just gone through this massive sandstorm. I hadn't been able to drink my daily ration because this was a really major sandstorm. We had to get into our sleeping bags and sort of hunker down, and I didn't get time to get my water out of my backpack. And so that night, when I usually drank my ration, I couldn't drink. And so the 3 o'clock in the morning, we got up again once the storm had abated and just went. And I lost my thirst at that time, which is a very bad indicator that things are going south. And then I started to have hallucinations. And we were on such a mission that the leader of the expedition, and his name was Elvis, and he was a Yugoslavia back then, survival expert. And he was on such a mission that he didn't let me stop to get my water out. And so we were just going because we had to get through to this point where we knew where we were and that we were going to make it out. And so I didn't drink, and I didn't. When you're in this state, your brain isn't working. I mean, you've got no glucose and you've got not enough water, so your brain is just it's like wading through treacle in your brain. You can't make good decisions. You're not thinking straight. It's like being drunk, basically.
Right. Yeah. Of course, when you're low on substrates, like your brain and your major organs that are essential to human function, like your heart, your brain, they will slow down their function to minimize the consumption of substrates because they know that substrates are scarce at the moment.
Absolutely. And so that does really weird things to your brain. So hallucinations, like I had the rocks, like they became monsters and they were chasing me and I was like completely out of it, right? And I've had hallucinations many times in ultra marathons because you're pushing, you've got no glucose left, your body's trying to burn fat, but I didn't have ketone esters back then, right? I could have really done with some ketone esters to keep your brain on track. So you're not, it's like when mountaineers go just extreme altitude, and I've done a little bit at altitude, you don't make great decisions because your executive functioning is just not on point. So really hard to make judgments about people in those situations too, because you're really just trying to put one foot in front of the other. You don't know to ask. Like I didn't put my foot down and say, hey, I have to stop now and get my water out. I was just like completely like a zombie, and sort of stumbling forward. So I got to the point where I really was, I think, not far from no return. Like you can, and Elvis actually said to me at the end of that day, people die with 20 litres of water next to them because they've gone too far. And it's better in your tummy, he said, than in your backpack. You've got to drink. And the other thing I've been doing during that expedition was actually, we had 2 litres of water a day, but I was only drinking 1.5 litres because I was so panicked about, not having enough. So that combination after, that stage, 5 or 6 days, I was severely dehydrated, and your tongue is swollen, and you can't. Yeah, it's awful. It's awful. And
then what process did you have to go through for that sort of to heal?
Just time, really, and
Okay.
And I did have to go on drugs and things for my kidneys, and even to this day my kidney function isn't fantastic. And what happens when you do ultra marathons is you can get something called rhabdomyolysis, which is when the body starts to break down the muscle tissue en masse, basically, and then the broken down muscle tissue sort of clogs up your kidneys, and you get rhabdomyolysis, which causes kidney damage, and this can be quite severe. So I've had that probably 50 times in my life. So my kidneys have had a hard life. Yeah. But yeah, so yeah, that was a pretty extreme one. But you come out stronger at the end of the day, but it does take a long time to sort of come through that and come out the other side.
And then let's talk about the emotional healing, because, obviously that takes much longer, and a lot of people don't even acknowledge or realize how severe their emotional damage, the emotional damage that does to their worthiness and their self-confidence and all of that. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, myself included. And,
yes.
We all have struggled in one way or another on whether it's via how we're being treated or how we're being brought up or how we see ourselves even. Like sometimes we are our worst critique and we are our worst enemy, where we put ourselves down before anyone else could, because we feel that if I am the harshest to myself, then I would have this defense mechanism that I won't be afraid of anyone else putting me down. But that is such an unhealthy sort of toxic trait that while temporarily it protects you, but over a long time it does put you in a place where you are not happy with yourself, and you are having this self-hatred going on. So let's talk about that healing process that you did.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think it's still ongoing. We download so much in the first 7-8 years of our life, and that's just from an environment that we sort of soak in and becomes our sort of default mode of operating, right? And we didn't have a say in that. That was our parents, that was our community, that was our culture that we were in, and so we downloaded a whole lot of crap from that often. Even with the best parents in the world, there's still stuff. And I think there's also a genetic component. Like I was born a very sensitive kid, very, like, anybody put me down, I was, devastated type of thing. Like criticism was difficult, and very sensitive. And, as I said, I grew up with this wonderful dad, but he was just so strict and so hard on us, and expected and wanted so much for us to do so well. And I was a little girl that really wanted to please my dad, so that, and I see this as being a blessing now, because there's so much value when you are able to push yourself so beyond, because you are wanting to achieve something, even if that's a negative motivator, like even if it's because you're scared of somebody or because you're wanting to please somebody else, it's still a great motivator for you to achieve greatness. And you may have experienced this in your life, I can imagine, where you're like, the pressure's quite high to be this amazing person, and like doing PhDs and things like that, what you've done, and the career that you've had, you don't get there without a hell of a lot of drive and a hell of a lot of work, and it's the same thing in the sporting realm or in the business realm. You've had to overcome an awful lot. So there's many benefits, and the most amazing achievements come out of that sort of a thing. But as I've got older, I've come to realize that I need to be kinder to myself, and it's not all about being a hard ass all the time. You probably know David Goggins, who's famous, who I've met in Death Valley, and he's raced over there, and amazing guy. But he does, for me, it's not always about go hard or go home and be the super tough. That message, I think, is great for a young person maybe who needs to harden up a little bit, but it can be the opposite, that you're too hard on yourself, and then you never actually live, because you're always living for the goal that you're going after, the target. And you can go to the point where you can break yourself. And having now studied genetics, I have a lack of dopamine receptors in my body. So I chase dopamine like no tomorrow. So that means I'm always on a mission. And that means that everything else around that mission is not important. And I've got to be careful with my loved ones sometimes, that I don't just go so hard with my mission that everyone else doesn't matter. We're all on my mission, which can be fantastic, because then you achieve incredible things, but sometimes at a huge cost to you, your loved ones, and to your enjoyment in life, if that makes sense. So it's this fine balance of going hard but not going hard all the time, and rest and recovery has become much more important to me, so that it's not just about emptying the cup. And the last 7-8 years of my life have been really hell. I've gone through lots of grief and trauma, and which we can get into later, but I now know that I'm not bulletproof. And now know that things like hormones and menopause and all of those sorts of things actually change the way you feel in yourself. And so I'm a much more compassionate human being for having gone through a lot of the stuff that I've gone through. And I suppose that's the mark of being older and a bit more, hopefully, wiser, and still much to learn. I still tend to mission out on everything, and constantly striving. And I've really got to sometimes go, no, I'm going for a walk with my husband down the beach, and I'm just going to sit there and enjoy for half an hour. It doesn't usually last much longer than half an hour, but it's better than it was, right?
Do you do any form of like meditation or any form of mindfulness practice that helps you sort of take yourself out of that mindset where we are chasing dopamine, or we are like being harsh on ourselves?
Yeah, I try to prioritize something that's going to stimulate my parasympathetic nervous system every day. So I'm actually searching out things now to calm my system down. And that can be as simple as cuddling my cat, or giving mum a hug, or going and watching the birds fly in the sky, or watching a sunset, or something, very trivial like that, or very everyday like that. Or doing something like hyperbaric oxygen therapy, which I'm a big fan of, that takes me into a parasympathetic state fully. After a hyperbaric treatment, I can barely operate. I can't sort of do any cognitive stuff after that because I'm so chill. So there's little tricks that I've learned along the way to try to balance that out. Sauna's another really good one, yoga, meditation. So I try to build this rhythm now in my day where I have little breaks in between and I don't just go full bore all the time because I know that I've emptied the tank too much in my life and I've got to put back in. And I think a lot of us could learn from that now is that you have to fill the cup with good stuff. If you are the type of person who's pouring out, then that means good nutrition, that means good sleep, that means good exercise and not over exercising, all of those sorts of things that go up to making a healthy, sustainable, longevity focused lifestyle. That's where I'm at now in my life. Before it was like just push to the absolute extremes physically all the time, and I don't know how I got away with it really. And I did have major issues from a health perspective. And so, ultra marathons is not a healthy lifestyle in a lot of ways. The training can be healthy, but the actual racing certainly isn't. The oxidative stress that comes, the massive amounts of inflammation, the catabolism, the hormones, all of these sorts of things that now that I study longevity in the longevity space a lot, I'm like, oh my God, it's a wonder I don't look like I'm 110.
No. So the takeaway point here is moderation and be kind to yourself.
Yeah, really it is. I mean, after all that hard-assness, I think there are times to go hard in life and then there are times to fill your cup again. And it's trying to work that out. When you're pushing to get that PhD through or you're pushing to get it across the Sahara, then you've got to go hard. You don't have a choice.
Yeah, you know what? That is absolutely true because I almost gave up doing my PhD in my first year. It was difficult. It was really hard. And I think in my first or second year, I developed Bell's palsy. Half of my face was paralyzed just from inflammation from the stress because they said, Bell's palsy could be caused by virus, but it could also be inflammation where your nerves in between your skull get inflamed and get pinched and therefore, lose the sensation. And I panicked. Like you look at yourself in the mirror and you smile and only half your face is smiling. And obviously the first thing they checked for was whether or not I had a stroke.
Yep.
But they're like, okay, it's not a stroke,
Luckily
so
not.
it's Bell's palsy. So I had to really have a sit-down conversation with my supervisor and say, hey, look, like this current lifestyle is not conducive and not sustainable for me. We need to make a change or else I'm out of here because I need to prioritize myself and I need to prioritize my health. And we did make some changes and ultimately I got my PhD and I am where I am today. But it's definitely not an easy path to take. And you're right. It's like they will be there will be a lot of instances where you need to sprint and you need to push yourself and you need to and some people get the dopamine out of it and some people get the gratification out of seeing how far you can push yourself and where your limit is. But you also need to understand as we age as well to understand your body better. I mean, I've got 37 years to understand my body well and some people have it longer. So that use that time wisely to really understand your body so that you know when to stop, so that you know when to rest. And stopping temporarily doesn't mean that you're halting your progress. In fact, you're taking one step back to take 5 steps forward. I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge our sponsors of this show, Ketone-IQ, the best exogenous ketone you can take to elevate your blood ketone levels. I personally take it every day before a podcast to wire my brain up, before and after my workout to really fuel my body. So give yourself a chance, take a shot, and you will feel the difference within minutes. So head over to hvmn.com and use the code HVMNPOD20, that is HVMNPOD20 for 20% off your purchase and enjoy your Ketone-IQ and give your brain the perfect fuel.
I love that because I think, like I am much more productive when I'm not pushing, even in business, right? I should be doing this, and I look at other businesses, I look at what you guys are doing, and I'm like, why am I not doing it? How am I not going to, I've got to do this, and this, and there's only 24 hours in a day. And you've got other priorities that you have to attend to, and yet you don't have the success that you want to have, and that's, because you set the bar so high, so you're just constantly chasing, and it really takes a lot of discipline for someone like me, and I guess someone like you, to go, no, actually it's okay to take a day off and not panic that everything is falling apart. And I think we've been trained into that, gotta go. The competition isn't resting, so you've got to go, right?
Exactly.
And you're in a race, basically. You're in a race with, against the, whatever it is, the business race, the sporting race, the race against time. We are constantly in a race, and we've just got to get to those rest points, those control points on that race, and actually recover and actually take time out and fill that cup again. And what you find is that when you do that, you're actually much more, I know this intellectually, like when I pull together much better work intellectually when I've had a rest and actually taken time out than when I'm trying to force it. And that creativity never comes in that forced status. So it's really important to actually step back. And I think also in the entrepreneurial and business world, if you don't step back and get that helicopter view, you're in the go of the daily grind of your business. You can lose perspective from a strategic point of view, which I definitely am guilty of. Like I'm just in the weeds, going hard, and not taking that helicopter view. So I'm trying to do that now, is to try to get good input from good mentors on that sort of side, and not just, I've got to get another social media post out today, yeah. or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
It's a really tough thing because you want to achieve, and I think the older I get, the more urgency I feel, because you feel like you have a job to do on this earth. I have a purpose there. I have a skill set. I have huge amount of knowledge that I've now built up over decades, that I've got to get this impact out further and wider before the end. And so there's this urgency that comes with aging as well.
Well, whenever you feel like that, I do get what you mean, but also remind yourself, as you feel that urgency, also remind yourself that nothing is permanent in this world. Even within our bodies, everything is always changing at all times, and we only have one life, right? Yeah, while it's great if we get an impact out, but for me, like what I do at H.V.M.N, if I can impact one person, that's better than none. Of course, it's great if I can impact 100 people, 1,000 people, millions of people. I can do what I can, in order to do that. But at the end of the day, we need to last long enough to have that impact. Do you know what I mean? Yes, there is the sense of urgency, but also yes, in terms of sustainability, because otherwise, if I'm broken, then
you're no good to anybody.
Exactly.
And this is the thing, and that's a good segue into the whole health. So what you and I both do now is try to help people optimize their health, help them understand the science, help them, really focus in on the area that they need to be working on, and whether that's with, ketones, which, I love, and I've got my bottle right here, had my shot this morning, or it's, optimizing a program for somebody and doing, genetic testing or thyroid or hormones or, organic acids or whatever the case may be for a person who's dealing with whatever health issue. It's trying to optimize. And I'm so excited for the technology and the science that's coming through now, because we can achieve so much more, and we are going to live longer if we don't burn out. So that's the risk factor probably for us, is the burning out, and keeping our HPA axis on point.
So what DNA tests do you leverage for your training program?
Yeah, so I use 2 different companies at the moment, and about to add a third hopefully soon. One's from Dr. Mansour Mohammed, who's a great mentor and teacher one of the world's greatest geneticists, and he has a company called the DNA Company, founded that, and this is a program that I use which has got 38 different reports that gives us information on things like immunity and hormonal health and cardiovascular health and personality and just so many areas, food, exercise, all of that sort of stuff. And so if I'm working with someone with specific issues, I often use that. And then I have another program called pH360 that is looking at epigenetics as well as the genetics. And this doesn't use actually a saliva test. This is using body measurements, body ratio parts and things like this, as well as a big, 10,000 sort of questionnaire of collecting sort of 10,000 data points. And this we get immediately, which is great. So I don't have to send anything off and wait 2 months and so on, which can be very beneficial if I've got someone who's got an urgent need now. And that just sort of really helps me build a framework. And I've found this to be so powerful in my life. When I did my own genetics and I realized that the ultramarathoning that I was doing was actually not conducive to my genetics. I'm made for short, sharp, high-intensity workouts of, say, 3/4 of an hour in length is ideal for me, combined with a lot of Pilates. Now, why is that? Is because I have, or Pilates, yoga, Tai Chi, that type of thing that's going to calm the nervous system. I have a lot of adrenaline, surprise, and I don't have enough dopamine, so I'm always chasing dopamine. So I have a lot of stress hormones. So I need to do things that are going to calm the system down. And then by doing ultra marathons, I have a very high oxidative stress load in my body. So I need a lot of antioxidant support, more than the average person, shall we say. And then by doing extreme long distance, of course, the inflammation, the oxidative stress that you're causing, the free radical damage, all of that sort of stuff, ended up with massive amounts of inflammation, problems with weight, believe it or not. The more I ran, the fatter I got. And I wasn't ever,
Why is that?
I'll give you an example. I ran through New Zealand and I did 2,250 kilometers in 42 days. It's like 52 marathons in 42 days. And I put on weight. And I was burning in excess of 10,000 calories. So calories in, calories out is not the equation, right? That is not the whole equation. If that was the case, I would have been a stick figure. What was happening is that my body was in a fight or flight state, complete fight or flight state for that whole period of time. And I was, every mouthful that I took in, basically my body was going, we're going to have to hold on to that. We're going to store it as fat and we're going to slow metabolism. We're going to do all of this other stuff. We're fighting with inflammation. And so the aftermath of that was that I was never the same again. Actually, like I never regained my strength to 100% after that race. And I was, how old was I? 43 when I did that, I think. And I had, inflammation, hormonal issues. I'd not been able to have children in my life. Infertility was another repercussion that I think was partly caused, not completely, but partly caused by the ultramarathons, and a sped up oxidative stress, so like massive amounts of oxidative stress, which of course is aging. So all of these aspects you have to consider. So when I did my genetics and I found like I should be doing shorter, sharper, I should be doing a lot more weight training in the gym. So now, like weight training is for me really important. So I go to the gym now and I do a lot of CrossFit style workouts. But I don't do heavy weights because my genetics says that I should not put super heavy weights through my joints. I'm quite lean and quite, I have good musculature, so I can do medium-sized weights, but I shouldn't be over-exercising, so that will cause too much oxidative stress. So for me, it's about short, sharp, go, and then recover. Yoga, breath work, meditation, all that other stuff that I bring into the mix. And that's been amazing for me to experience that change. I lost all the excess weight that I had, which was just puffiness and water and, and it was only like 4 or 5 kilos, but that's massive difference. And so for someone who'd run and started running because they wanted to lose weight, that wasn't, and I'm quite passionate now about women, especially in their 40s, you need to go to the gym and do some weight training, or at least body weight training, resistance work is going to be far more effective than just doing miles of cardio, which is what we're told, right? Do a lot of cardio to lose weight. That doesn't work, that recipe.
Yeah, and we talked about it on this show quite a bit on resistance training and increasing muscle mass actually helping increase the basal metabolic rate
Totally.
and help burning fat. You know, I'm really interested in this genetic test myself, actually.
I'll take you through it.
No. If after this, you know, I'm gonna follow up and ask more information if it's available in the US even. And just find out, because right before we started this recording, Lisa and I, we were just talking about weight and that she thought I would benefit less from a long fast because I look leaner. And I told her I've been overweight all my life since, you know, I was a kid until I was in my undergraduate years, where I started exercising and lost about 45 pounds, about 20 kilos.
Wow.
And then I started weight training and all of that, and then everything else, is history. But I'm definitely interested to find out, like you said, you know, am I more suited for high volume training or high strength training, high resistance training, or am I more suited for, do I need to do more cardio?
Yeah.
Because, excuse me, I feel that I can build strength very easily, but if I don't include cardio, I tend to put on fat.
Yep.
So even a little bit of like steady state cardio is better than none for me.
Yeah. So you may lie on the other sort of side of the spectrum where you need a lot more cardio and a lot more, and you can probably deal with heavier weights. And we'll see if we did the test. I'd love to take you through it. That would be a privilege and an honor to be able to do that with you. And it really can help. Like, I'll give you another example. I used to make my husband get up. Who's a different genetic makeup. I used to make him get up at 5 a.m. and do a CrossFit workout with me, right? Absolute disaster for his genetics. Perfect for mine. I can do that. I can do a high stress thing in the morning, get my cortisol up, and I'm raring to go for the day. For him, that is the time of the day when his testosterone is replacing. So in hormone regulation, so he should be sleeping. That's when he should be asleep, right? And he should have a very slow, calm start to the day. So by putting him into a high stress situation, a CrossFit class, I was sending his cortisol through the roof, which caused weight gain around the middle. And then, you know, so for his discipline and diligence of getting up early and doing CrossFit, he got fatter and unhealthier, and it lowered his testosterone, which is never good for a wife to do that to the husband. You know?
Yeah, and that's a problem with a lot of people trying to get fit, right? And I think we all have experienced that when we do the work and we put the commitment in and when we put the dedication in, but because and having the opposite effect, it's so demotivating, and that's why I think the more we know about technology, the more the technology is available, then we know our genetic makeup and how we talk about personalized medicine. I think, you know, personalized training based on your genetic makeup is going to be a thing.
Absolutely, it is already, and it's just so powerful. I mean, another example with my mum, you know, whose story we can get into a little bit, but she was 108 kilos and she's 5 foot nothing. She was very overweight and she had an aneurysm 8 years ago. And, you know, back then I didn't know anything. Mums were for looking after you, weren't they? You know, it was my sort of, you know, she was always this wonderful mum who was always looking after everybody and not looking after herself. Had this aneurysm. But since then we've, and I've written a book about her journey back and we can talk briefly about that. But she's lost 58 kilos. And only because I cracked the code on her genetics, I now know what time of the day she should be eating, what type of food she should be eating, what type of exercise she should be doing, what time of the day she should be doing it, when she should be asleep, you know, how to optimize her hormones, even at 81. Like all of these aspects, that's 58 kilos. That's an entire person gone. And she was on diets forever and could never shift it because she was doing the wrong combination of things. And yeah, she has to have a pretty strict life, and you know, ketones are absolutely magic for her brain rehabilitation. As well as sharing with you last week, anecdotally, we've had her on the Ketone-IQ now for I think 5 or 6 weeks, and just absolutely fabulous the changes that I see in her cognitive ability, her expressiveness, her ability. She had very much that flat effect. Her ability to go all day without going to have an afternoon nap now, which makes life harder for me because I'm like trying to do my work and I'm caregiver to my mum. So I'll put you to bed now so I can get my work done this afternoon. Now I can't, thanks to ketones. Because she's like, what's
and
next?
a disclaimer, we did not pay Lisa to say all of this, not yet at least. So
No.
it's completely independent. Lisa actually paid us to buy the ketones.
Absolutely.
And
And I sell them down here now, and I'm super proud that we're selling them down here now. And I work with a lot of people with brain injuries and strokes and dementia and Alzheimer's and athletes as well. So for me, like, ketones are the most exciting thing that I have in my toolkit. So I've had salts before, and I've had esters, and the esters are just that next level. I think the salts are great, but I think the esters just bring up that next level. With I couldn't get my mum into a really high therapeutic level with the salts, but I can with the esters. And she's on a keto diet as well, so it does rely on the lifestyle side of things as well.
So you've tried both ketone ester and the Ketone-IQ?
Yeah. Okay. And the keto salts and the Keto-IQ.
Right.
Yeah. So and the salts are great. I think there's an application for those as well, but I think that the esters is really that next level up. Especially when it comes to brains.
Right, and to clarify for listeners as well, so ketone ester was the first generation of H.V.M.N drink that we released. So that's BHB ester bond with BDO, which is butanediol, whereas Ketone-IQ is a chirally pure R13 butanediol. So it tastes a little bit different, and it also is much cheaper than ketone esters as well.
Yeah, so sorry. Thanks for that clarification.
Oh no, I know this is a very common question as well. I think I can't repeat enough because it's being asked so often. Even when we talk about it on our social media, we talk about it on website. There is always going to be people asking. It's like people asking, what's the difference between whey protein, casein? What's the difference between different forms of creatine, monohydrate and all of that? So it's the same thing, and I don't mind, repeating it. I think the more people understand what the different exogenous ketones are in the market, the better it is for them to really make an informed decision to choose what's better for their use case.
I was talking about Ketone-IQ, so that's what I was talking about, to be clear. And it's been great, and we've got a lot more testing and things to do, and working with my clients as well. Excited to see some of the benefits coming through for them as well. And I know that the research is ongoing, and we need a lot more research. But just from anecdotal stuff and N-of-1 stuff, it's next level, and I feel it on my own body as well. Like, I'm 54 and I still want to perform at my absolute peak, both cognitively and physically, and anything that I can get to help me focus and help me perform better is very important to me. And ketones have been, Ketone-IQ has been brilliant for that.
I'm so glad it managed to help you and your clients and your mom. And you spoke a little bit earlier, about your mom's condition and your book, Relentless. Tell us more about that, actually.
That's my mum there, everyone. For anyone watching on the video. So she had an aneurysm 8 years ago, left with massive brain damage, had a stroke as well, paralysed, in a wheelchair for a couple of years. And I should have shared that story on the first episode, but for those who haven't heard that one, we were told that 74 years old, massive brain damage, she will never have any quality of life again, put her into an institution, and I absolutely refused. At that point, I sort of stopped doing the ultramarathoning, and I focused fully on her rehabilitation. And it took me 2.5 years to get her from being like a baby who couldn't even put a piece of food in her mouth or chew or swallow or sit straight or anything, to driving the car and going to the gym 5 days a week and walking 3 or 4 Ks a day. So really, a miraculous recovery, but it wasn't miraculous. It was a daily absolute grind of an 8-hour program that I put her through every single day. And we were told constantly, she's got neural fatigue, you'll never push through, you'll never be able to do this, you'll never get her to do that. They were all wrong. What they didn't know was the mindset of an ultramarathon runner is you just grind it out day in, day out. You don't expect the results, you just do the work. And that mindset is what you need when you're rehabilitating from something so massive as this. You can't come in and go, I'm done my workout, where's the results? If you're asking for the results every day, you're not going to see them. And we would have months with just a plateau where she's not going anywhere, and then we would have sudden big jumps in her performance, you know. And if you hadn't pushed through those months of nothing, and I had people constantly telling me, why are you pushing her so hard? Why? Because this is a difficult, you know, training that I would put her through and really taxing on me and the family and her. Why don't you just let her be and give her an ice cream and stick her in the corner, you know? And I'm just like, that is not an option. Like, she was going to die if I didn't do something. So whatever, even if it was hard, even if it was painful, even if it was I didn't know the outcome at the beginning, I just kept this vision in my mind of her walking and talking and being my normal mum again. And you know, I got there, and despite all, not a single medical professional told me there was any remote possibility, except for the people that I got on my podcast. And I went for searching for the most amazing scientists and doctors. It's one of the selfish reasons I had my podcast, was to be able to get access to the most amazing people. And I would learn from these people, and then I would just study, and stayed one step ahead of her in her recovery, and studied everything from the epigenetics and genetics to functional neurology to you name it, I studied it. And stayed one step ahead of her. And then we got her back to full health, and everything was fantastic. And then about 18 months ago, or just a little bit less than that, she... I thought she was having another stroke. I rushed her into the hospital. The hospital sent me home, said there's nothing wrong, but her face was dropped on the one side. She was slurring her speech. She was drooling. She was not coherent. And so I knew there was something wrong. I went back into the hospital again 2 days later with blood pressure right through the roof. And again, they sent me home. And I started to push for an MRI. They did a CT scan. They couldn't see anything. So I started to push for an MRI, and it took me 3 weeks of terrorizing the people and doctors, because you have to be persistent. If there's one thing, I don't know what it's like in America, but over here, you better fight for the resources if you need them. Took me 3 weeks to actually get an MRI. And we finally got the results of the MRI. She had, you know, brain tumours, one massive brain tumour and some smaller brain tumours. And then they rushed her down to Wellington, our capital city, where a fabulous brain surgeon and his team took out one of the tumours, and then they did the pathology on that, and it came back with an aggressive form of CNS lymphoma, which cancer. And we were told over and over again, there is nothing we can do, and she is going to, you know, die very soon. It's very fast growing, and there's nothing we can do at 81. If she was younger, we would have been able to do R-CHOP therapy, which is a form of chemo and bone marrow transplants and things, but not at her age, and she wouldn't survive that. And then I dived into the literature again, and I started to study the metabolic approach to cancer. And I did advanced genetic testing on her particular type of tumour. And I put together a protocol and a team of doctors around her. We had 15 doctors on her team, from integrated oncologists through to experts on longevity, through to nutritionists, to everything. We did a strict keto diet. We did hyperbaric oxygen therapy, a very powerful therapy that I'm so passionate about. We did keto, we did natural health supplements, we had different off-label drug combinations. I put a type of chemo in called temozolomide, because my advanced genetic testing had told me that one specifically she'll respond to. We did an immunotherapy. I threw the bus at it. And
the kitchen sink.
I did, and the kitchen sink to boot. And it took me 12 weeks to get rid of the tumours. so that the tumours were no longer visible under the MRI. Under the resolution of the MRI, we don't know, and there was no other way to test, but from that perspective, there's no more cancer, and we've been able to keep that now, touch wood, for a year and a half. She's perfectly healthy and fine again. And I've seen her brain come back again. So I've seen the brain go from being like a baby with hardly any higher function to being back like an adult to then having concussion after concussion, as she did have falls throughout her rehabilitation time. She's had a number of concussions, and then she's had the brain tumours, and she had brain surgery, and she's had cancer. So you couldn't chuck much more at this brain, right? And I've seen her come back time and time again. She's now at a state where she is independent to the point where she can dress herself, she can go for walks by herself. She's not allowed to drive the car. They've taken her license off her, unfortunately, and we want to still get that back. We're working on that. But she still has her life. She goes out with her girlfriends. She has fun. She's able to be there for her grandchildren. And we still work on the areas of deficit, the things like the motivation and the creativity and the, reading and all of that sort of jazz. But to see her brain go from that to that to that, backwards and forwards, it makes me really excited for the Alzheimer's research, the dementia research, for the brain injury research. It's not necessarily a one-way street, and I know it's not a one-way street because I've lived it and I've seen it. And if someone can do that, from the age of 74 to 81, not a young person who's had brain injuries, or the future is bright if we start listening and looking and doing the hard yards to put in protocols that are really complicated. You got red light therapy in the back, you've got hyperbaric over there, you've got transcranial, I've got photobiomodulation devices. My house is a biohacker's paradise. Right?
It sounds like I've now been to New Zealand, so I think my next holiday destination.
Oh, I'd love to have you come down, and while you're down here, I'll make you do a speech at a conference. I'm trying to organise a big longevity anti-aging conference down here, so we'll have to talk.
Would be a pleasure. Yeah, absolutely. No, that was an amazing story, Lisa, and I thought to myself when I saw your email for the first time, and I got forwarded your email from our customer service team, and you were like, oh yeah, anecdotally, my mom has gone through aneurysm, stroke, concussions, brain tumors. I was like, what? All of that? Yeah. And still like completely functional and also benefiting from Ketone-IQ.
Yeah.
That is a super powerful statement and a powerful situation. And I'm so happy that we're able to help even and
Yep. And it's the next step,
Yeah, and also, kudos to you too. You were there for your mom, and it's a life worth fighting for, right?
Yep.
And you didn't give up, and even with the people telling you to give up, you didn't. I mean, I guess all that marathon running and training really put you in this position. And sometimes it makes me think, we experience that we've gone through and things that we've gone through in life, it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do to prepare us for what we are going to face.
Amen. That is the thing. That is the point. Now when I look back and at some of the really harsh experiences that I went through in different races and expeditions and failures and all sorts of things, and then you come up to a situation like this and you're like, thank God I went through that, because if I hadn't, I wouldn't have been knowing how to deal with this situation. And don't get me wrong, there's not so many moments where you're just on the ground broken and exhausted and not knowing your way forward. And it's all very well for me to sit here now and go, there's my story, that's what I went through. But at the time, I didn't know that it was going to have a positive outcome. And this is the power of going all in anyway with your mindset and holding a vision. So when people tell you that you've got some terminal illness, you've got some permanent disability, you're going to have this condition for the rest of your life, question that. Question that and put a vision of you being healthy or your loved one being healthy in your brain. That is half of the battle. That if you can visualize yourself or your loved one healthy, then you're already halfway there. Like, you've got hard work, you've got miles of hard work ahead of you. But if you can't visualize yourself getting better, you will not get better. it's that important to have that mindset, and that's what I'm grateful for the ultra marathon experiences. Because if you imagine, like, you know, when you're running in the Himalayas 220k somewhere, or Death Valley, and people are going, that's impossible, you can't run at that altitude, it's impossible, you can't run in that type of heat, it's impossible, you can't carry that weight, and you do it, and then you're like, well, hang on a minute, I'm going to question everything now. Because is that just their person's experience? And this is very much, I'm not bagging out on the medical professionals. Like, we need them, for God's sake, they're amazing what they do, and their surgeries and their things and the drugs and the whatever. But don't put your limited thinking onto the person that you are dealing with. Give them the chance that you might not know everything. You know, Don't take away all hope. I had a very lively debate with the head of our medical council here, who was at a conference that I was emceeing, and he was speaking, and he afterwards we sort of went head to head a bit, you know, because this is my story, and I was telling him things, and he was going, all of this stuff here at this wellness conference is all woo-woo bullshit, including genetic testing. And I'm going, and therein lies the problem. Because you haven't actually gone and looked at the research lately to say such a comment. If you had, you wouldn't be saying that. And then he said, well, you know, I showed him my book, and we were talking about Mum's story. And he said, well, that's amazing. But aren't you giving people false hope when you put out a story like that, because others aren't going to get it? And I said, and they told me I would never get it either.
Exactly.
And you are taking away all of their hope. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, and I'm not saying everybody's going to get there. And I've failed. You know, I lost my dad 2.5 years ago in a situation that was terrible. And we failed, you know, like, we lost him. I know what it is to lose. I know what it is to win, but you have to go all in. If you're going to have a chance at coming back from some of these major illnesses, and you have to build a team around you, like now working with cancer people and people with major brain injuries and motor neurons disease, I put a team around them. Whether if they have the resources, then it's a team of doctors. If they don't have the resources, then it's a team of YouTube and podcasts and the best professors and the best information that we can get for that person. Right, and then putting a team around you means you don't just get one biased opinion. You get a really balanced from the latest research, and you've got to understand that your expertise as a PhD in the area that you've done is extremely in depth. And then another person over here who's got a PhD in something else, or just experience in something else, is got another really deep dive of experience that can share. And that isn't going to be in your local clinic, I can tell you that much, because there's a lag of 20 to 30 years behind what is seen in your local clinic, especially when you live in the ends of the earth, versus what's actually out there in the world. And yeah, so that was a very interesting, lively debate with the head of the medical council. I don't think I changed his mind, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, they are going to be people like that. I think especially unfortunately, you know, the older generation of scientists and doctors, they are very dogmatic when it comes to it.
Yep.
And I think a lot of it also comes down to the ego, right? The self, the pride. And
Yep.
I you know, many times I have admitted that, oh, I was wrong, or
Yep.
new research comes back and I say, oh, okay, what I've claimed before may not be completely accurate. And people might think, oh, I've got a master's from Columbia University, I've got a PhD from Oxford. It doesn't matter. I'm a human and I can be wrong. And I think the courage to admit that you're wrong, it's way, way more, like much more than the courage you need to be right. And
It's integrity.
and it's integrity, but it's also an opportunity for growth. Like
Yep.
when I admit that I'm wrong, that's when I go back in and start learning again. And that whole process of learning never stops until you die. And I think that's what's wonderful about the human brain. It's just, it keeps developing. Like, yeah, there's so much knowledge and information out there that's just waiting for you to learn and waiting for you to apply to your own life in order to optimize your health and fitness.
And I think, you know, like with a lot of professionals who have spent decades in a certain dogma, in a certain learning line, it's very hard to think that, oh shit, maybe we got something wrong, and then I have to give up all that to go. And I've had the privilege of meeting many doctors who have gone through that evolution, usually when a loved one gets sick themselves, and then they realise, hang on a minute, I'm going to have to start thinking outside the square because we've run out of options here. And that's very often the catalyst for them, people getting into the functional medicine space or the integrated medical space, and actually opening their eyes. And I've got a fantastic teacher and orthopedic surgeon, longevity specialist, who's gone through that whole process of doing the, traditional orthopedic surgery and, and then realizing, hang on a minute, this stuff's not working. And then really diving into the regenerative stuff. And
you really have got a whole team.
The most amazing teacher, and they've seen both sides of that equation. And we just need more people to take the red pill, so to speak, wake up that there's a little bit more than your one university, your one school of thought, your one dogma. And start realizing that there's a lot more going on. But we've gone into the weeds here a little.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a great way to sort of close this conversation as well. I think we've learned so much from your stories. Thank you so much for sharing them.
Thanks,
we went from mental strength to physical strength to endurance to health and brain health specifically, and how the wonderful story of you and your mom fighting it through, battling it and triumphing.
It's a wonder she hasn't done a cameo in the background like she did last week on my
I know. I was wishing that she would, so that she would come out and say hello. Like, for people who are watching, then we can actually say, hey, hello, mom, mother.
Well, last week she went out the front door, but I've made sure she goes out the back door. She's gone over to my brother's for coffee, so we won't have a cameo today, but
fair enough.
She is doing very, very well, and one day we'll have to connect you to you can actually see how she's doing. And I actually take her to some of my conferences when I'm speaking at medical conferences and things, and
it's like, this is the living proof.
There you go, and then people are really moved when they actually see, and especially because I've got a little video clip that shows her at her worst and then her progression, and that does boggle the mind a little bit. So the book's really worth a read, not just from a brain recovery and therapies perspective, but from a mindset perspective and a family love perspective. Love is a very, very powerful, motivating force, and you can move mountains when love is the motivation, and when you have hope and when you have a vision. So I think it's a good place to finish it. Keep that vision alive of you or your loved one being in full health if you're dealing with anything difficult.
Very well said. And if our listeners would like to find you on, social media and all that, where can they find you?
So I have my website is probably the best place to go, which is just lisatamati.com, and Tamati is Tamati, lisatamati.com. And I'm at Lisa Tamati on most of my social media except Twitter. I'm Lisa Y Tamati, which is my middle name, Yvonne. That'd be great. I have a YouTube channel with over 600 videos. I've got like half a dozen documentaries for my races on there too, which is really cool. And I have a podcast called Pushing the Limits, which that was on last week. So make sure you go and check that out. That's where everyone can find me. I'm pretty easy to discover.
Great. Thank you so much for your time, Lisa. And it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate you.